My fiancé married my sister, with my mother's full blessing. I remember standing at the altar, thinking it was my day, my moment, and then it just fell apart. My mom, the woman who was supposed to have my back, convinced my fiancé to marry my sister instead. Said she was stronger, better, more suitable. I looked at them both, at the whispers sliding through the church, at her proud smile like she'd won something. I couldn't say a word. I just walked away, quiet, numb. Left behind not just a wedding, but my whole family, the life I thought I had. It took years to build myself back up, to find a life where I was in control. Now, with a man I actually chose, I'm celebrating what should have been my real anniversary. But when my family sees him, everything from that day surfaces again. And in that silence, every secret from 10 years ago came crawling back. I woke up to the soft light sneaking through the curtains, the kind of calm morning you hope will never end. The air smelled faintly like lilies and whatever perfume my mom sprayed every time she was nervous. I kept thinking about the day ahead, how everything would fall into place perfectly, like in those movies where the bride glows and everyone smiles and nothing ever goes wrong. I kept telling myself that too, over and over, like a mantra, because the excitement was starting to ripple through my chest and make it hard to breathe sometimes. Mom came in with a tray of tea and a slice of that coconut cake she knew I loved. She smiled, but it was tight, like someone trying not to break. She sat down beside me on the bed and hugged me, but it wasn't like the hug she used to give when I was a kid. It felt more like she was being polite, like a hostess greeting a guest. There was no real warmth, no pride in her eyes. I didn't say anything, didn't want to ruin whatever mood I was trying so hard to hold on to. I stared into the mirror as I got ready. My dress was hanging there, heavy and white and unreal, like the rest of the day was some kind of dream I wasn't quite awake from yet. I tried to focus on the little things, the curl the hairdresser was making, the way the ribbon tied just so around my waist, but every time I saw my reflection, I caught this flicker of doubt. Not about Jack, not really, but about what the hell I was doing. The butterflies felt more like tiny fists punching at me. My phone buzzed, and I saw a message from my best friend wishing me luck. I typed back some quick thanks and try not to sound too scared. There's this part of you when you get about to change your whole life where the nerves don't scream, they just settle in quiet and heavy. Like, maybe I wasn't sure if I was ready. But I pushed that down fast because the door swung open and my mom was back, fussing over my veil. She said something about the weather being perfect, about how Jack was pacing outside, like he was just as anxious as I was. I nodded, but couldn't bring myself to smile. I wondered if she noticed I wasn't as calm as I kept pretending. Then my dad appeared, looking stiff as he tried to adjust his tie. He caught my eye and grinned, a little too quick, like he wanted me to believe he wasn't nervous, either. I caught the way his jaw tightened a second later. It was as if there was a storm no one wanted to name. I looked away and focused on tightening the corset on my dress, suddenly feeling like the whole thing was a costume I couldn't shed. My heart pounded louder in the sudden quiet of the room. I didn't know then what was happening outside those walls. The whispered phone calls, the rushed texts, the uncomfortable glances between people who knew something I was blind to. All I knew was the relentless noise of my own pulse and the sudden prickling of fear under my skin that I buried under excitement. The hairdresser finished, stepped back, and told me I looked beautiful. I smiled weakly at myself in the mirror, but inside, my stomach flipped. Maybe it was just the nerves, or maybe I was already sensing something was off. But I swallowed the feeling like a bad taste and told myself it was all in my head. The day was mine. It had to be. Then the door creaked again, and I caught my mom's eyes darting past me, like she was watching for something I wasn't supposed to notice. I turned just in time to see her purse slip off the table, spill its contents. There was a small envelope, unmarked, that fluttered to the floor. She crouched, picking it up with fingers trembling just a little. I didn't say anything. I just watched her. And for the first time that morning, I felt cold. Not from the dress or the room or the quiet. It was something else. Something that said the day wasn't only mine anymore. But I still told myself to ignore it. I had to. Because if I didn't believe in the wedding, the whole thing, I didn't know what would be left. That afternoon, Mom asked to speak with him alone. I wasn't in the room when they met. She told me it was just a quick chat, something about planning the wedding. But the moment I saw him afterward, something was off. His smile looked forced, like he was carrying a weight he wasn't supposed to share. Later, I overheard them talking on the phone. The voice was Mom's, calm, almost too calm, and he was quiet, hesitant. It hit me then how I'd been sidelined, left out while Mom slipped in ideas, planting seeds I didn't see coming. She started small, like it was no big deal. You should consider if she might be better. Not me. Asterisk her. Asterisk my sister. I remember the way her tone shifted toward softness, like she was sharing a secret only he should know. She understands what he really needs, even in ways you don't yet. I think that's what cut the deepest, the casual way she said it, like it was a fact, not some poison she was pouring into him. Her voice never rose. She didn't have to yell to tear me down. Just enough whispers, repeated, in all the right moments. It was a slow burn, an undercurrent I wasn't ready to feel until it was already too loud. I ran through every conversation they'd had since then, trying to catch the moment when everything flipped. Maybe the day he stopped texting me first, or when calls got shorter, more distant. I wanted to be angry at him, but part of me knew the damage was already done before he even realized it himself. The thing is, Mom never looked like a villain to me. She was always loving, always there, but in this, watching her move pieces quietly on the board felt different. Calculated. Like I was a pawn she could sacrifice if someone else fit her game better. After that meeting, he started second-guessing me out loud. Things I'd never heard before. Do you really know what you want? Or are you sure you can handle all this? At first, I figured it was normal stress, pre-wedding jitters. But it felt like a wedge. Not a crack. A gaping door pushing me out of what was supposed to be ours. One night, I caught him looking at my sister's social media because Mom had told him to see how perfect she seemed. Stable, calm, basically everything I wasn't supposed to be. He said it was harmless, but in that second, his eyes avoided mine when I asked why he was scrolling through her pictures late at night. It felt like betrayal, but also like watching my whole world fray while I stood frozen, scared to speak up. I questioned if I was paranoid, or if this quiet storm was really happening. Mom's voice echoed in my mind, gentle but relentless. She'd be better for him. I confronted him once, bracing for an apology, or maybe just the truth. Instead, he looked at me like I was the one undermining everything. Mom's right. Maybe I don't know what I want. That line hit harder than anything. I wanted to scream, to fight, but the real fight was knowing the person I loved was slipping away, tangled in my mother's web. She didn't need to shout to ruin me. She just whispered enough times, and the poison soaked in before I even saw it coming. That night, when I finally locked myself in my room, I realized this wasn't just about him, or even Mom anymore. It was about what I needed to become if I wanted to keep what little I had left. I thought I could change the story, but I was wrong. I thought it was just a phase, something that could be fixed. But the silence after that night told me it was much worse. We were at rehearsal, sitting around the room with the rest of the wedding party, but I couldn't stop noticing how off he seemed. Usually, he's the kind of guy who makes a few jokes, cracks a smile, runs through the ceremony steps with me. That day, he barely looked at me. His focus was somewhere else, and not just distracted like tired distracted, but like, pulled. I caught him staring at my sister, Claire. It wasn't just a glance either. Every time I'd look at him, his eyes were already on her. She was ridiculous in that moment. Laughing at something ridiculously small, her face glowing like she had all this extra light around her or something. And he never looked away. I swear. His eyes followed her like she was the only thing in the room. It was the kind of thing you'd notice if you weren't trying so hard to pretend it didn't bother you. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just tired or paranoid. But that tiny knot in my stomach grew each time I caught them. Claire noticed something too. Later, during a break, she nudged me with a sly smile and said, "You okay? You've been staring at John all weird." I froze. I could have lied, said, "Yeah, I'm fine." But I just said, "I don't know. It's nothing." Thing is, I wanted it to be nothing. I wanted to believe the guy I planned to marry was the same guy who told me I was the only one, the only woman he ever wanted. But there was this undercurrent, like a flood waiting behind a dam. The way he laughed at Claire's stupid jokes, the way her eyes sparkled when he said something under his breath, like a private joke. It was unsettling. He kept checking his phone too, every few minutes. At first, I thought maybe it was work, or that he was stressed about the wedding. But when I glanced, I caught snippets. Something about tonight and can't wait. I felt my chest tighten, but I pushed it down. We still had rehearsing to do, and I had to stay composed. I walked over to him, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay?" I asked. He looked up quickly, like I caught him off guard, then smiled the kind of smile that doesn't quite meet your eyes. Yeah, just thinking about the vows. I nodded, but inside, my mind was racing. You're not really listening, I said, forcing a laugh. You're looking at Claire. He blinked, then looked towards Claire, who was twirling her hair, completely unaware of the tension building in the room. Okay, maybe I was, he admitted, annoyed. What of it? I felt this flush, embarrassment mixed with sudden anger. Nothing. But it was everything, wasn't it? He'd never been like this before. Claire came over then, all sweetness, and put her hand on my arm. It's just rehearsal stress, she said, smiling like she was helping. But even that felt like a lie. They shared this look, like something unspoken between them, and it twisted the knife. I found myself pulling away, spinning around, and heading back to the circle to join the others. I could hear snatches of their chatter. Voice fills the room like a low hum. But all I noticed was the tension hanging between John and Claire. It wasn't just there. It was thick and heavy, almost daring me to see it. I caught John watching her again. Every time I glanced over, he was mid-smile, leaning just a little too close. She leaned in too, all casual, like typical sisterly behavior maybe, but it wasn't. Not the way he looked at her. And then I felt this sharp, sinking feeling. Like I was the last to catch on, and that maybe everyone else already knew and was pretending not to see. The rehearsal wrapped up, and people started packing up. John barely said a word to me, just a quick nod, and he disappeared toward Claire's car. I didn't even know they planned to leave together. I stood there frozen for a long moment. Part of me wanted to just march over and ask what the hell was going on. But the other part, the part that still wanted to believe, told me to wait. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Meet me tonight. We need to talk. I looked up. The parking lot was emptying fast. And I realized something. Maybe the rehearsal wasn't just practice for the wedding. Maybe it was the stage for everything falling apart. I remember standing there, waiting. The church was packed, everyone's eyes on me like I was supposed to glow or something. My hands were shaking. I tried to keep them steady, but damn, the warmth just wouldn't come back. Then the music started, the one we picked together, and I thought, okay, he's going to be here any second, right? But the aisle stayed empty. At first, I thought maybe the music was just off schedule. Maybe he'd get stuck in traffic or something stupid like that. So I kept looking down the aisle, gripping the bouquet until my knuckles went white. Minutes dragged, and my heart started pounding so loud I thought people could hear it. People were shifting, whispering, casting sideways glances at the door like they were waiting for someone who wasn't showing up. I wanted to say, hey, wait, but my voice just stuck in my throat. And then they said it. Not in a big announcement, no dramatic crowd hush. Just a few whispers at first. People near the back murmuring while looking towards the hallway outside the church. I caught bits of it. He's marrying her, his sister. What? The world just muted. Like the sound died in my ears. I blinked. I wanted to shake my head, tell my brain to work right, but it wasn't happening. I forced my gaze towards the entrance, and, sure enough, there they were. Him, hand in hand with my sister, walking down the aisle together like everything was normal. I couldn't breathe. Someone gasped, and then a few more. My legs felt like jelly. I had to grab onto a pew just to stay standing. I kept asking myself, is this real? Am I losing it? But there was no denying it. The man I was supposed to marry was marrying my sister. My own blood. My heart shattered into pieces I didn't even know existed, and somehow, I held it together. The priest started, and I heard her name clearly when they called out the vows. It wasn't my name anymore. Not even close. My sister's. For a moment, the world spun. I could feel the weight of every stare, every single person there who'd come to celebrate me, now watching my humiliation in real time. The whispers weren't quiet anymore. People were talking openly now, questions floating like smoke around me. How did they not know? When did this even happen? Why would he do this to her? I wanted to run somewhere, anywhere. But I stayed locked in place, like some kind of statue made of glass about to break. My face went numb. There was no room left for anything else. Confusion mixed with sinking disbelief, and beneath it all, this deep, aching heartbreak that felt like it was swallowing me whole. I could see my sister's face. It was smug, confident, like she was winning some twisted game. And him? He looked calm, like this was the plan all along. The man I loved just stepped over me without a second thought. I kept replaying every single moment that led up to this. The smile, The promises, the plans. Did any of it mean anything to him? Did he even care at all? I wanted to believe he didn't, because if he did, if he knew what he was destroying, how could he be so cruel? Somewhere between the tears and the silence that settled over me, I realized I was completely alone. Everyone I thought had my back was staring at the spectacle, but no one was reaching out. My family, my friends, they were just watching the disaster unfold like I was some kind of accident. When they said her name instead of mine, the world just muted. I didn't cry for a while. I was too stunned, too shattered. Just standing there, pretending to be okay, while the person I trusted most in the world was stealing everything from me, right in front of everyone. And in that moment, I swore to myself I'd never forget how it felt. Not the pain, not the humiliation, not the numbness that followed, because something inside me broke, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. But one thing was clear, I couldn't stay there. Not like this. Yet, I didn't move. I was stuck, waiting for what would come next, even though deep down I knew there was no going back. I stepped out of the church, the cold air hitting my skin like a slap. The doors thudded shut behind me, and suddenly everything felt emptier. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because I refused to give them that gift. I forced my legs to keep moving though they wanted to buckle. My mother's voice echoed behind me, soft but sharp. You need to let it go, honey. Holding on won't fix anything. I wanted to turn around and scream that she didn't understand, that no kind words or platitudes could erase what had just happened. But I kept walking. The pavement was slick with rain, though the sky was finally clearing. People passed by, heads down, eyes elsewhere. Nobody noticed me, alone in the middle of all this noise and movement. Maybe I wanted it that way. I almost wanted to disappear. There was a part of me that wondered if I should have broken down back there, sobbing over everything. Loss, betrayal, the weight of pretending I was okay. But all I felt was this bitter knot tightening in my chest, like grief and anger had entwined and were choking me at once. Crying would have felt like giving in, like admitting defeat. So I swallowed it down hard, pretending I was tougher than I felt. The church steps beneath me felt rough and unforgiving, and I traced the cracks with my foot as I stood still. I thought about how much I used to rely on their words, their presence, how my whole world felt tied to them. And now, walking away from that, it felt like I was shedding so much more than just a building or a name. I was shedding pieces of myself I didn't even realize I'd been holding on to. My mother's voice wasn't wrong about one thing. Holding on to the pain wasn't helping. But detaching wasn't about letting go. It was about surviving without them dragging me down. I was breaking away, and it scared me more than I wanted to admit. I noticed a group of kids laughing nearby. Their noise startled me. So loud, so free. For a moment, I envied that. It made me consider if, maybe, I could find something like that again. Something that wasn't heavy or loaded or soaked in the past. Yet, it felt impossibly far away. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, staring at the streetlight flickering overhead. Messages from her, apologies, promises, explanations I wasn't ready to hear. I didn't want to face that. Not now. Not when every word felt like it would crack the fragile shield I'd built around myself. I realized I wasn't just walking away from the church or the funeral. I was walking away from the person I used to be, from the version of myself that was naive enough to think things could ever go back to normal. There was this strange quiet settling over me, like the world had paused to watch me choose. And I did choose to stop pretending, to stop shrinking myself to fit into their stories. I breathed deeply, tasting the sharp sting of cold air mixed with something raw beneath it. A bitter clarity, maybe, or the first flicker of something like hope. But that hope was fragile and brittle, like the pavement beneath my feet. For now, all I had was this moment, this quiet decision to start over even when everything around me was broken. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because maybe, just maybe, crying would mean I was still stuck somewhere I didn't belong anymore. So I kept walking. The city hummed around me, indifferent and alive. And for the first time that day, I let the silence stretch out ahead of me. I thought it was over. But the silence that followed said otherwise. It's strange how life can pull you so far away from where you started, and yet a piece of that old weight never quite leaves you. I moved across the country a few years ago, changed my name, my job, even kept my circle so small some days it made me feel invisible on purpose. When I look back, people say I'm strong now, that I've rebuilt everything from scratch and made a name for myself. But honestly, I don't think that's true. I wasn't strong then, and I'm not sure I'm strong now. I just stopped waiting for anyone's applause. I remember settling into this city for the first time, dragging my suitcases filled with whatever I thought was enough to start over. I found a job I never thought I could get, a decent one with a decent paycheck, and started answering to an email address that wasn't tied to all the mess from before. It wasn't easy. Every morning felt like walking through a fog where faces and memories kept trying to pin me down. But slowly, work became routine, then something like an escape. I buried myself in projects, deadlines, meetings, whatever it took to stay busy enough not to think about the nights I froze alone in that apartment, or the days I spent waiting for a call that never came. This city didn't know me as that broken girl anymore. I was the one who stayed late to pitch the next big idea, the one whose phone buzzed with opportunities, the one people called when they needed results. I got used to the quiet victories, closing a deal, nailing a presentation, catching someone's eye across the room without feeling small. It felt good to see my name on those emails and reports. Sometimes, I'd catch myself standing a little straighter. Like maybe, just maybe, I mattered. But no matter how far I ran from my past, a shadow followed. There are mornings I wake up, and it's like I'm there again, trapped in some apartment I barely recognize, but remember every smell of. I hear the quiet voice in my head that used to tell me maybe I deserved what happened, that maybe I should have been stronger back then, stood up, fought harder, run faster. And sometimes I hate that voice for still visiting me, because I don't want to live there anymore. Still, it reminds me that strength isn't a light switch you flip on and off. It's messy. It's uneven. People tell me I inspire them, say my story gives them hope, but the truth is more complicated. I don't want to be a symbol of strength. I want to be just a person who survived and who's trying to live without always glancing over her shoulder. I stopped waiting for applause because I realized the only one who ever needed to see my fight was me. Not some crowd or some therapist or some memory that won't let go. The other day, I found an old picture of myself tucked away in a book, a photo from before everything. It was that same haunted look, but behind it was a flicker of something else. Probably hope. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the lines around my eyes and mouth, trying to tell that girl she didn't have to be alone forever. That was the moment I understood something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to live. Maybe it wasn't perfect, maybe there are scars no one sees, but I'm here. The silence in my apartment is different now. It's not filled with the same fear or confusion. It's calm. And sometimes, when I walk down the street, or finish a project, or call a friend, there's this quiet pride that I almost don't let myself feel, because I'm scared it'll disappear if I get too comfortable with it. But tonight, as I sit here, the quiet is thick again, not full of fear, but a reminder. I'm no longer that girl waiting for something she'll never get. People say I'm strong. Maybe that's true now. Or maybe I just learned not to let the darkness win. Maybe that's the same thing. I thought the past was far behind me. I thought I'd left it in the dust with the rest of my old life. But it still hums beneath the surface, quiet and patient, like it's waiting for me to slip. And sometimes, I wonder if I ever really escaped at all. The first time I saw him, it wasn't anything dramatic. We were both just in line at a small coffee shop, and I noticed how calm he looked, like he wasn't in a rush or trying to prove something. He smiled at me when I accidentally bumped into him and apologized like it was his fault, even though I was the one who was distracted. That kind of small kindness, it caught me off guard. I hadn't seen that in a long time. We started talking, nothing forced. He asked about the book I was carrying, and I told him a little. He listened without interrupting or pushing me to overshare. That was new. With my ex, it was always about performance, how much attention I gave, how impressed I was supposed to be. But with this guy, it was quiet and easy, like a soft conversation that could just exist without any pressure. We met again the next week. And the next. He never acted like he was trying to woo me or win me over. He just showed up, didn't flood me with texts, didn't demand explanations for my silence or mood swings. One night, we sat on his small porch watching the sky darken, and I told him more than usual about myself. All the stuff I usually hid. He didn't flinch, just nodded, like he was saying, I get it, without even needing to say it. I remember glancing over and thinking, this is what trust feels like. Not the shaky kind that's always waiting to shatter, but the slow kind, the one that builds without you noticing until it's already there. There was no rush with him. No expectations to fix, anything, or to prove I was worthy of love. He never promised forever or made grand declarations. He just kept showing up, in his quiet way, bringing me coffee on mornings I looked like I barely slept, texting to check in without being clingy, and listening when I talked about the nightmares I still sometimes had. Those little things mattered more than anything I'd ever experienced before. One night, it was raining hard. I was supposed to meet him for dinner, but I called to say I wasn't feeling up to it, that I couldn't face the noise of people and the world. He told me to stay home, rest, and he'd just swing by to drop off a jacket instead. When he arrived, soaked but smiling faintly, with that worn jacket in his hands, I realized how simple kindness can feel like the most incredible thing. We didn't say much. I just let him in. We sat there on my couch, rain drumming against the windows, and for a few hours, the past didn't scream so loud. I caught myself wanting to reach for him, reach out in a way I hadn't dared for a long time. And the weirdest thing was that it wasn't about needing to be saved or fixed. It was just feeling seen without the weight of old scars or having to explain them 1,000 times. I think that's what I love the most, not being broken for him, but just being me. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm too wary, if I hold back too much because of what I went through. Maybe I still am. But with him, there's this fragile hope. Like maybe healing doesn't have to be a giant leap, but a slow, steady walk. A walk where you don't have to watch your back every second. Last week, we sat silently in his car after a late show. None of those desperate words rushing out, just quiet warmth filling the space. He reached over and took my hand without asking. It felt like permission, but also a choice. I squeezed back, and for the first time in a while, I wasn't scared. Maybe I'm starting to trust again. Or maybe I want to believe I can. Either way, this feels different. Real. And that's enough for now. But then, right after that moment, my phone buzzed. I didn't look. I wasn't ready to see who it was. But I knew, whatever it wasn't going to let me forget the past just yet. The whole day felt wrong from the start. We had planned this anniversary party for months, and I thought having Mom and Lily there would be healing, or whatever. But as soon as they showed up, everything got tight. I could see it in Mike's face, that forced smile he always gets when someone's pushing him into awkward territory. Mom and Lily came in like they were walking into a museum, smiling polite, scanning the room carefully, like they were pretending to enjoy some dull exhibit. They barely even looked at me at first, like I was a stranger or some guest they were obligated to invite, but didn't really want to. I kept telling myself to calm down, to let this be normal, but inside, things were twisting. I felt Mike's hand tremble next to mine. I squeezed it, but I could tell he wanted to ask what the hell was going on with my family. I wish he had. He deserves to know how bizarre this all is. They sat stiffly opposite me at the table, made some small talk about work and the weather, but there was this invisible line between us, thick enough to cut through the fancy curtains and the dimmed chandelier light. Lily caught my eye once, and I caught a flicker of something. Maybe guilt? Or like she was trying to remember how to be my sister after all these years. I wanted to breathe that in, but then Mom interrupted with a compliment about the food that fell flat, like she was reading from a script, and the silence came rushing back. I caught Mike's glance again, his mouth pressed into a thin line. I knew he was hearing the same tension I was, maybe even feeling it sharper. It's weird how the people you want to trust the most suddenly look like strangers when ghosts from the past stroll into the room. When I tried to steer the conversation towards something lighter, Mike's new job, or a funny story about the dog, Mom just nodded, distracted, like she wasn't fully present. I don't think she wanted to be here, but she felt like she had to be. That weight filled the room more than the smell of the candles or the clinking of glasses. Then Lily quietly said something about how long it had been, almost like a question, but no one answered. Just more silence. It hung between us like thick smoke. Me and Mike exchanged this look. We both knew that inviting my family was an idea that sounded better in theory. At one point, I almost asked Mom why she hadn't been around, what made her pull away all those years ago. But the words died in my throat. I'm not sure if I was protecting her or myself. Maybe both. The formalities started to feel more like a performance, and my chest tightened, but I couldn't find a way out of it. No jokes, no drinks, nothing. I thought if I just smiled and said the right things, it'd ease up. But they didn't. Not really. Near the end, Mom and Lily took a step back, as if the evening had reminded them why they stayed away in the first place. They said goodbye quick, hugged me tightly but awkwardly. I felt their warmth, but also their distance, like they were leaving a door open, but just barely. After they left, Mike and I sat in the quiet that filled the room. I wanted to believe tonight was a step forward, but the empty spaces they left behind screamed otherwise. I thought maybe this could work, I said softly. Mike shook his head a little, no words. That's when I realized the past isn't just a story you tell once and move on from. It's here, sitting at the table, watching us. And maybe, just maybe, some things aren't meant to be fixed tonight. I remember the exact moment the door creaked open. It was late, later than anyone expected. The room was trying to keep calm, still buzzing from everything we'd said and done, but then that sound sliced through the air like a cold blade. Everyone flicked their heads toward the entrance, but I swear, no one dared breathe for a second. And then he stepped in. It was him. The same man. That man. I froze. My mouth went dry, even though my heart surged in every direction at once. He looked different somehow. Older, maybe more worn, but his face, those eyes, I knew them like scars on my soul. It was the guy who left me standing at the altar, the one who vanished when it mattered the most. My mother was sitting beside me, clutching a glass of water, and the sudden shock made her hand tremble. The glass slipped before she even realized she was crying. The sound of shattering glass snapped everyone out of their stunned silence. No one moved. You could hear a pin drop except for my mom's soft gasps and the clinking of falling shards. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream at him for every sleepless night, every embarrassing explanation, every whispered apology that came too late. But all that came out of my mouth was nothing, just silence swallowing me whole. He looked around the crowded room, his eyes landing on me. There was no rush to speak, no guilty apology. Just a cold, almost amused stare like some twisted joke was playing out in front of us. I remember thinking, is this some kind of sick, impossible dream? For a moment, I thought I'd lost my mind. How could he just appear here, years after he left me? After all the pain and the lies. The timing was so cruel, it almost felt scripted. I caught my own reflection in the broken glass on the floor, shaking my head as if that could wipe him from the air. But he was real, breathing, smirking just enough for me to see the underlying arrogance. Then some bitter irony settled over the room. Here he was, standing awkwardly in a place that was supposed to break me, surrounded by people who never forgot what he did. And I wasn't standing alone anymore. I was stronger. Hurt, yeah, but not defeated. The silence stretched, thick and unbearable, until my mother finally broke it, choked on her words. Why now? He didn't answer, just looked over at her with a shrug, like her question was meaningless, like the past was just a faded bruise to him. I felt this strange calm wash over me. Not that relief breeds forgiveness, but this quiet certainty that I wasn't the girl who would fall apart anymore. His arrival was no longer a threat, it was just a fact, something to be seen and faced, not feared. Thought you might want to see what you left behind. I found myself whispering, though my voice barely cracked through the tension. He laughed then, a hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. Guess I'm just a bad habit you couldn't quit. That line stung, like a mean echo of all the nights I'd spent wishing he'd come back. Said sorry, made it right. But I didn't let the anger take over, not yet. Instead, I looked around at the faces I'd chosen to be there, the people who never let me forget my worth. I glanced back at him, this ghost of my past, standing in a room that no longer belonged to him. And somewhere deep inside, a flicker of something dark and strangely satisfying stirred. I thought it was over when the glass broke. But the cold, cutting silence that followed told me it wasn't. Not even close. We ran into each other by chance at that little coffee shop downtown, the one neither of us bothered with anymore. We both looked different, like people who'd been through a storm and lived through it, not the same naive versions of ourselves from years ago. I wasn't angry or ready to start something. Honestly, I didn't even want to see him at first. But there he was, standing in line behind me, looking just as surprised. He said my name, a little quieter than I expected. It was strange hearing it from him, like this ghost from a chapter one thought I'd closed for good. I just smiled, nodded, and ordered my usual. We didn't dive into all the old mess right away. Instead, we sat outside with our coffees, sharing that awkward silence only people who once knew each other deeply can share. I remember thinking how weird it was that hatred wasn't what filled the space between us. There wasn't fire or shouting, just this quiet, like maybe we were both ready to acknowledge the past, but not live in it anymore. He asked me about my life. I gave some careful answers, not too much, not too little. And when it came to me asking about him, he hesitated. Then he said something that stuck with me. I never stopped regretting how things ended. That simple confession shattered any last piece of bitterness I still carried. It surprised me how much I wanted to believe it. Man, we're all just messed up people trying to fix what we broke. I guess I realized then that revenge would have been pointless, empty. I didn't plan for it. Life just handed me this weird kind of justice, showing me that we'd grown apart in ways that made the old pain irrelevant. We talked about the years between, the mistakes and the scars, quietly admitting how much time we wasted clinging to things that only hurt us. There was no blame, no yelling. Just two people who had learned hard lessons and decided, silently, to walk away better for it. I couldn't help but think how love really feels when you strip away all the toxic stuff they fed us. Transactions, debts, power plays. It's not about revenge or payback. It's just what's left when all the humiliation washes away. And maybe that's the truest kind of love there is. Before we parted, I looked him in the eye and said nothing. But there was something in that silence, a respect, a quiet triumph that I didn't think I could feel again. We didn't promise to meet again. We didn't exchange numbers or make empty plans. We just went our separate ways. Walking away, I felt lighter. Like the weight I'd been carrying for all those years was finally gone. Not because he owed me or because I got even, but because I chose to let it go. And that felt like winning. They taught me love was a transaction. Turns out, love's just what survives after humiliation.